Not gonna lie, I love these music to relax study 2 streams. They're great. Most of them anyway. There's some rough ones. Alrighty, so few things. So first I was going through and creating project teams in Blackboard. So I noticed that there are a couple of you who haven't formed or joined a team yet. I sent you an email, so you know who you are. If you didn't get any email, you're not on a team, you don't know, please reach out to me as soon as possible because you have something due by this Sunday. The way to check is if you go into Blackboard, go to class sessions, software engineering, scroll all the way down. We have group work for Friday and meeting minutes upload. If you do not see this, you're not on a team or something screwed up in Blackboard. Either way, let me know if you don't see this because this is your submission. Why am I talking about this? Friday, we will not have a live stream. So I sent out an announcement before class. The other one got it after their class. Basically, Friday, I will be at a conference. It'll be a virtual conference, so I'll still be here. So if you have any questions or anything during the class time, I'll be on Discord. I'll be on Discord all day anyway. But we're not going to have a live stream or a live session Friday. However, what we will have is stuff to work on during that time. So in any normal year, I would give you all time in class to work on your term projects or work on lab assignments or something like that. So this is basically an out-of-class lab, I suppose. But this one is a little bit sneaky, or it's trying to be helpful, but it's sneaky in a professorly way, I guess. So this Friday, I would like your teams to work together for the hour we're in class. Obviously, you have the assignment now. You can do it right now. You can do it Friday during that time, but basically here's a dedicated hour to work on this. What I am looking for, this says Saturday, that should be Sunday. Apologies for that. Let me fix this really quickly. Sunday. Why did I write Saturday? Sunday, 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 Sunday. 20th. I cannot read a calendar. Anywho, this is a forced group meeting for you all. So if you didn't catch it last time, I'm expecting you all to start holding your team meetings with weekly meeting minutes. This assignment is basically your first meeting minutes for you. And what I'm looking for here are 3 things. And apologies for the Blackboard formatting. It doesn't like spacing in between bullet points. I guess next time I'll have to write the raw HTML code to make it look nice. But first things first, I want the elevator pitch for your project. So I have seen in the chats that some of you are kind of coalescing towards an idea. Maybe there's some back and forth. What I'm looking for you to do is try to harden that into an actual project idea. Any of you ever hear of an elevator pitch before in the stream here? Wonder if it's a buzzword that has trickled down to you yet. No. Okay. Get used to it. This is something that you will probably hear throughout any project that you're going to be working on. So, like your senior project, sophomore project. This is a lovely buzzwordy phrase where pretend that you're in an elevator with an investor or a client, and you have the time that you are in the elevator to tell them your idea, the entire thing. It's what, handful of minutes, right? So this is your product pitch. I'm looking for 2 sentences or less, so super abbreviated, just what is your idea? What are you planning to do? Why is it cool? So very, very short overview. Why am I asking you for this? Well, I want you to start thinking about your term project before your homework is actually due. However, the text you put in here, reuse it in your introduction. So you have 2 sentences written already if you do this, right? Cool. So elevator pitch, high level overview of your project. Why should I care as your customer, right? Why should I invest money in your thing? Second, we have not talked about any of the hard artifacts that you'll be developing. So we haven't covered requirements yet. We haven't covered use cases or user stories. These are things that we'll cover as we go. But to get you to start thinking about some of these basically features or implementation details, I want you to come up with two quote unquote features that you will be implementing in your project. Obviously, this is a big semester-long project, so you're gonna have a lot of features. What are two of them that you can foresee having to work on? So if you're making a web app or any kind of an application where you're trying to figure out who the user is, you're probably gonna need a registration system or a login system, right? If you're making a game, you need a method for handling enemy artificial intelligence or user input or movement or anything like that, right? So those are all features. If you're developing a Java application or some kind of a forms application, you're going to need to present a form to the user. You're going to have to populate it with data, right? So what is this form, for instance, or what is this window you have to create? So the point is that I'm looking for you to think of two, what's its name, and a high level description, like a paragraph or less. So again, very high level at this point. Keep in mind, these two features you present here, you can reuse when I ask you to develop use cases or when I ask you to develop requirements, right? Pre-thinking is what we're kind of getting into here. So we're doing our project envisioning stage, to use one of the terms we'll talk about later. So two features, elevator pitch, and this one is a little bit more ethereal, I guess. So I want to know what process your team will follow internally. I'm not necessarily going to hold you to a metric or to a particular process for your teams, but I'm kind of curious what you think is going to work best for you to keep progress moving forward. Right? Are you going to go an agile route where everybody works on something each day and the next day maybe we, trade projects or we trade features or you keep working on it or something like that? Are you going to go more linear, waterfall-y kind of route? The reason why I'm asking you is I kind of want you to start thinking about this as an actual development project, not just some code to hammer out. Okay. So if you think about what we're doing in class, we're basically doing a variant of waterfall with prototyping. So this is something that's going to become very common for you. You're going to learn all these models, and we're going to talk about the high level in a little bit today, about what makes all these models work. But we're going to take a standard model and we're going to modify it for a class. So the class is going to work for the term project that basically you're going to be submitting things as you learn them, right? So once we talk about requirements, you'll develop a requirement spec. Once we talk about use cases, I'll have you develop some use cases and sequence diagrams and class diagrams and all of that fun stuff. These are going to be iterative as we go. You're not going to really have a way to go back and update your requirements in this process because the homework will already have been due. Now, there's nothing stopping you from modifying your project as we go. Obviously things are going to come up, but we're not going to do like, okay, turn in version 2 of your requirements, for instance, or turn in a new architecture diagram. You're just going to update them for your project as we go. And then the plus prototyping part is, as I mentioned, we're going to have a midterm kind of a demo-y type of thing. So I'll basically be looking for prototypes along the way. So we have this iterative process with where you are with your project. Again, I'll give you requirements for what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for a full featured thing at midterm time if you're worried about that. Mainly status, things of that nature. So again, if you do not see this meeting minutes upload in your Blackboard, please email me because that means you're not on a team or you were incorrectly assigned or something like that. One per team. The announcement that I sent out before was I wasn't thinking correctly, so I had this due Sunday, yet your term project repositories are not due to be created until the end of the month at the latest, right? Ideally, it should be done in advance so that you can flesh out any problems and talk to me if you run into anything. But you didn't necessarily have a place to upload your meeting minutes by Sunday if you had, didn't do the term project aspect. So I just made it a separate item. And then, afterwards, you'll start checking them into GitHub. So again, the short story is no class Friday. You do have some group work to do this week, which would take the part of class time if it was a normal year. Anybody have any questions on what I'm looking for at all? Again, this isn't to overload you with work. It's to basically get you to do a chunk of your homework, forcing you to do a chunk of your homework before, 11 p.m. the night before. Which is something professors care about, that you're all staying on track. Alrighty. So I will keep an eye on the chat just to make sure that nothing pops up. Again, I also sent this out. If you don't see your name in the spreadsheet, that means I didn't get a homework submission from you for whose team you're on. Plus, you didn't reach out to me in some other way. So please make sure that you are, there, basically. Alrighty. Onwards to class. So the plan for today is we're going to finish up process models. And if time allows, I'm going to go over the term project repo a little bit more just to show you kind of my process, basically, which is that big, long, verbose part of your homework. So we left off with extreme programming and Agile. And we talked about how there are a ton of different types of Agile and different flavors of Agile. But the thing to consider with Agile, which we're actually going to get into a little bit more in a little bit, is that the key difference here is that we are focusing on the people and the communication and iterating our releases over, simply having all of these hard artifacts like a requirement spec or use cases, class diagrams, models of that sort. We'll hammer those out as we go, but we're not looking for a fully developed package right at the outset of the project. So what we're going to basically be covering today is a slightly different view of similar concepts. So whereas before, okay, red dots back, we're looking at kind of the specific models that you could go through. Now we're going to look through what actually makes them a standard or what type of model they actually are. So we have linear, we have iterative, we have evolutionary, and we have parallel. So basically we have 4 different main categories. And why is this kind of thing important? So here you're going to see boxes with arrows. All right, these are very little detail as to what's going on here. The key point, and I'm going to give you the spoiler early, is that we have all these different types, and we're going to talk about all of them as we go. As long as you understand the key aspects of a model and what makes them useful, the odds that you actually follow the correct process when you go into industry is very small. Because you might go, a evolutionary approach, and we'll talk about what these can be later on, obviously. You might have different preferences for which activity goes where, maybe which activity you go back to. Again, the important thing is going to be that you at least have the standard process that your company is using or your group is using, but understanding what comprises them means you can kind of play with it a little bit. But again, it's important to follow it once you figure that out. So first and foremost, here we have linear process flow. Does anybody know what type of model this looks like that we talked about last time? I'm getting a million pings on my phone, so I'm going to look at this really quickly while you all take a stab at this. Waterfall, exactly. So take these boxes, put them on a gradient or a hill, then you have your waterfall, right? So a very linear model. You go to one box, you go to the next box, and the next, and the next, and the next, and then you're done, right? This is where we have our very brittle model where any kind of change, any kind of problem that crops up, you have to go back to the start. And that is not necessarily a bad thing depending on your project needs. So let's talk about some of these boxes here. Anybody remember what communication could be? So this is the first step of our process. We have to communicate. You as Engineers, computer scientists, this is probably not your strong suit unless you're very outgoing. I am not, so communication's not always fun. Um, but what could this mean for a project? What kind of emotes are non-sexual in nature that I can throw on here? Get the initial idea of the project. Sure. So keep in mind, you're probably going to be working for a company or a startup of some nature, right? You have to conceptualize the project. Generally, that means you have a customer who wants something done, right? You're not just necessarily going to go build something out of the goodness of your heart as an engineer. You're going to have a project manager telling you what the project is that we need, or a client or a market that's driving creation of this project. So you're going to have to communicate it, right? So you conceptualize the project, you talk to your customers, you talk to your clients, you talk to the other people involved in your project, and you communicate. Email, meetings, phone calls, Skype or Zoom or however you communicate, right? What the point of this stage, though, is that we are getting our initial requirements down, our initial system design. So this is the part where we're getting everything the customer wants. Again, customers, whoever's sponsoring the project, and we're writing it down under requirements. And then we're done. No communication again in this very particular model. Again, depending on the needs of your company, maybe you do something more V-shaped and then you have a way to go back. So yeah, initial requirements, then you go to your planning stage. Let's talk about our system design. Let's talk about our architecture. Let's talk about all of the pieces of the puzzle and start formalizing it. Then we go to the modeling stage. Let's get a little bit lower level. Let's come up with UML diagrams. Let's come up with class diagrams, sequence diagrams, activity diagrams, all of these fun things which you are going to have to do very soon. We get a little bit closer to the code. Then you go into construction. Take all of this hard effort that you put into it and then build it, right? Do some testing, do some integration testing where you bring your modules together. Again, things we talked about last time. That's going to happen in this stage. Then we're going to go through our deployment phase. We might have some maintenance tasks to touch up on, but this is basically going to focus on delivering your product to the customer and getting it out there. And then any maintenance plans after this are going to be obviously negotiated upon. So we have this very particular model here, and let me dip back really quickly to this set of slides, just so that we can refamiliarize ourselves. This should look exactly the same, right? Very linear process, except here we have more detail, but purely linear. Okay. I really need to disable its pings on my phone when I'm in the middle of class, I notice. Pro tip for you all as well. Must be something happening because my phone is just blowing up. All right, so the second one we've got here, a little bit more iterative. So again, this looks exactly the same in terms of the boxes that we had. Again, we have communication, planning, modeling, construction, deployment. These are all common to any process that we have, and they're all necessary, all right? You may go into a company where perhaps they frown upon UML modeling, all right? They might see it as an extra activity which is not useful. So then you skip some steps during modeling, but you're still going to have to come up with system design decisions and architecture decisions, and maybe instead of a UML model, it's more prose or natural language. Right? The key is that you have to know what the project is, you have to plan out the overall system, plan out some implementation details, and then do the building of the project. And you keep in mind too that coding and implementation are not always necessarily the same thing. It could be building a like a Simulink model kind of thing. I'm trying to think of like one of those drag and drop programming languages, whether you go like a block language or a simulation environment where you're just dragging boxes and moving data flows around. So it just depends on the project, but it's still going to be there. And then deployment, let's get it out to our customer. Let's get it out to the client and see what they think about it. Key difference here, which you can all plainly see. We've got more arrows, so we can go back to communication from planning, right? Here's the customer's idea. We make up our system plan. They don't like the plan. You have some holes in it, or it's too ambitious. We can't do it with the budget you provided us. Let's go back and refine, go back and refine. And the keyword refinement is going to be very important for software engineering. How do you take a kind of fluffy, not necessarily crystallized idea and harden it into something you can build, right? So we're going to be refining down these steps. Okay, so modeling, way to go back. Construction, a way to go back. Another question to you all. We have all these arrows. Are they simply lines on a graph, or is there more meat to them than meets the eye? What kind of things happen when we have to transition from step to step in a software process? Oh no, he's making us talk again on a delay. What happens here? So let's say that we communicate, go to planning, something went wrong, we have to go back to communication. What does this kind of an arrow entail? I got lag, what was the question? Basically, I'm looking for what these arrows mean. So obviously it's going back to start somewhere else, but there's so much more detail happening here. What are some things you can think of that are part of a transition? I pretend like I'm looking around the room, not at my half put together office. Allows you to go back and add. Yes, so that is the purpose. I guess the point is that I'm trying to make here is that let's say that I have to go back from building to communication. These transitions are basically milestones in your project where we are checking off that we accept our system design. We're checking off that all of our models pass certain criteria. So for each one of these phases, we might go through a validation stage. Can the iterative process flow have different types of loops? Absolutely. That's why kind of what I'm getting at here is that these can all be constructed however is appropriate for your company as long as it is documented that that is the case. Right, so this is not the end-all be-all of iterative. Iterative just means that you're building upon past knowledge and you have the ability to transition. All right, but the point is that let's say that we want to go from planning to modeling. Consider that you have to have consider you have a checklist of things that have to be done to go from stage 2 to stage 3 or planning to modeling. They all have to be passing various criteria. They have to go through code reviews or technical reviews, expert opinion revision, maybe user studies. So whatever your process is going to be, you have to pass all these steps and then you can move on. When you go back, you're gonna have to go through all that process again, get the same people involved, get maybe new people involved who are experts now. So just keep in mind that these are not just arrows on PowerPoint or I guess Google Slides, but these are actual efforts that have to be done. Alrighty, so iterative. Does anybody know what this one might be? So we had waterfall for the last one. This one, I guess since we have some lag, I can talk to this one a little bit. Here we have, could be like a V model or the prototyping model, where you are going through the steps, right? But you have the ability to go back. Like think of that V model. It's taking waterfall and kind of forcing another arm into the matter, where the left side was validation, or sorry, the left side was verification, the right side is validation, and probably mirrored on stream. I'm hiding my, let's see. Yeah, validate or verification, validation, validation. I don't work well with mirrors. Basically, you have ways to go back at various aspects of this process. Same with prototyping, right? You're going to have a revision that you release, and then you can go back and refine things as you go. But again, these arrows have meat to them. What that meat is tends to be company dependent, sadly. Okay, here we have another one. So this is the evolutionary process. You get me talking long enough, I'll probably start talking about fun things like evolutionary computation and genetic algorithms and how much fun they are. However, this is evolution as a software process. Consider it that you are starting your project and it's going to evolve over time. Evolution can be negative, can be positive. However, ideally, you're starting at a state and you're growing as you go, right? It's getting better, ideally. Key difference here is we basically have a cycle that's happening every release. So we'll go through a communication phase. We'll go through the planning phase, the modeling, construction, the deployment. This is all happening in one cycle. Then we get to our release, whether it's your alpha, or you call it a version 0.1.2. Whatever this is, it's an output of this cycle. And again, back to the questions that I'm seeing pop up, the difference between this model and the last one, model, I can enunciate properly. Here we have one release at the end, right? So you have all of our steps. We're getting through. Then we have our release. Here, we have a release every time we go through a cycle. What's to stop you from adding a prototype here or adding a release cycle here? Nothing, right? It's up to your company, or it's up to your group or your project team or whatever type of unit you are. If you have this kind of ownership and you can apply a process, nothing's stopping you from modifying these. The key difference is, again, you have to write it down and then follow it. I keep saying that and I keep stressing it. It's super important for auditing purposes. If you ever audited, they're going to look at your process first thing. I can guarantee it. So here we have, again, more of an evolutionary cycle. Kind of interesting. Very reminiscent of, oh, what was that model that just kind of spiraled around? Was it a spiral? Can you still go back to previous steps in evolutionary? I'm going to take the easy way out and say it depends. If you have an inner feedback loop, that's possible. This particular flavor that I'm showing you on the screen, you can't go back until you're done with your release. This is group dependent, and this is where it starts getting a little bit hazy, right? Because we had different, and again, these things I'm showing you now, these are the highest level of what a model can be. So evolutionary here, this is basically looking at things like the phase development or your incremental models. Also the spiral model, which I was kind of alluding to with, hey, it's spiraling. Each of those has different transitions available. It's just which implementation you are using. So we have that going on for us here. Then last but not least, we have the interesting one, which we've talked about all the other ones. This has to be Agile, right? But we have a parallel flow. So here we have our little loop-de-doop right here. So we're doing our communications, our planning, our modeling. We can have our loop here. We can have parallel development activities happening at the same time, so happening in parallel, right? To take this from an Agile perspective, we're doing our daily stand-up meeting, we're doing our communication, hashing out our requirements, maybe user stories are changing for the day. We update whatever models we need, and then we go right into construction, or we give that to the team member who is a whiz at developing login forms or something like that. You know, add a new field or add a honeypot field for a bot or, you know, whatever it's going to be. Things are happening in parallel. We're going to talk a little bit about Agile here in a moment, but you can actually see kind of how things are going. Or here we also have arrows facing multiple directions. Can go from communication to planning or communication to modeling. Again, just depends on your process. So these are all the high-level models, and if time allows, I've got a little Slido quiz, not graded, just more of a for fun to see if you're paying attention type of thing. But which model links up to which high-level model, I suppose. Now, to the fun part, which, depending on how time goes, I will probably speed through a little bit, but I wanted to go into Agile a little bit more. because I think it's pretty important for you all to know since it's very, very popular these days. Odds are if you go to a newer or fast-paced company, you're probably going to be doing some variant of Agile. So here we have a lovely graduation picture. In Cyrillic, so I'm going to assume somewhere in Eastern Europe or Russia or something of that nature. But all this means is that this is content from my grad class, which they're going to get some of that tonight. So let's talk about Agile. Those of you who have ever done Scrum or Kanban, either you're going to cringe or you're going to get excited about the notion of a post-it note. Well, let's write our day's activities or our user story or whatever deliverable we have to do and stick it on a whiteboard. And then I'm going to take it off when it's my turn to work on it. Anyway, Agile. Agile at its core, and we talked about this a little bit last time. We'll go on to go into a little bit more detail, but we're going to try to put everything together into a single loop here. So planning, analysis, design, implementation, this is all going to go together, right? I mentioned Agile is parallel. These are going to effectively be parallel activities. Then you're going to have your system release, or you're going to do your system design, then go to that block. It just depends on how you're structuring things. There is this notion of an Agile triangle, which I find super interesting because this is basically a graph with 3 axes here. So you have value, constraints, and then quality. Where you fall in this triangle is how well you're satisfying one of these objectives. So if I've got a product with great value but terrible quality, you're going to see that trade-off on this triangle. The reason why I said this is interesting is that you could really apply this to any project. It doesn't have to be Agile, to me anyway, personal opinion. So I've got some bullets here to show you all, and I'm not going to read them to you, but the key point with Agile is that you're focusing on people, you're focusing on your team, you're focusing on your customer, and your communication. So this notion of people-centric for this process. Let's hide my dot. So we care about people, and we care about software, and we want the software to be working. So basically, this notion of constant communication, of changing requirements, of happy and gelled teams, this is all going into Agile to make sure that project releases that you're showing your customer know that they're happy with your progress, basically. So you're basically getting constant feedback here. So that's the whole notion of what Agile is. Primary measure of progress is working, executing software. Also ticking off all your user stories and pulling all of your post-it notes off and all that fun stuff. Point is that your team should be happy. Happy teams means you're getting good output. Happy teams means nobody's burning out, that everybody feels ownership, all of this lovely, happy, everybody's friends kind of an environment is the idea. The idea, right? Is that always the case? Oh no. These are jobs for people. It's not happy, fun time at work all the time. But the point is that we're trying to do something a little bit different than our standard approach. And question to you all, so here's this little simple Agile figure. Is it that simple? So do we focus on happiness and constant product delivery, constant communication, and do we just get working software? Is it that simple? Question to you all. And again, I'm intentionally not letting my cynicism show through here. It's a legitimate open question. It's never that simple. Absolutely. Thank you for that. And no, big letters, N-O, not that simple. Agile is not just this little simple flowchart. It is something massive. Okay, so this is one model. So the SAFe for lean enterprises. Lean is slightly different focus than Agile, but they're very similar in concept if you look at it from a high level. But instead of having requirements, you're going to have user stories. Instead of having features, you're going to have epics. Basically, you have different terms for your standard software engineering processes. Okay, you're going to have project owners for your various, epics or features or whatever you want to call them. An epic is just a chunk of this overall system. You're going to have management to deal with. You'll have the people who are at the architect level. So like an enterprise would be company wide. You might have solution architects who are more in-depth focused for something in particular. So I guess here's the levels, and right here your portfolio, large solutions, programs, team-based. So basically you have different aspects of Agile. So if we look a little bit lower here, I mentioned Kanban at one point. This is where you have your sticky notes on a board. You may have Scrum masters dealing with project teams. If any of you have ever played around with Jenkins or Travis CI, you might know what a continuous integration pipeline is. Usually they go into those full stack tagged jobs, but basically it's just a way to continuously release your product. So I submit a build, it releases later that day. That pipeline is the unit test, the system tests, all automated. But basically you have a pipeline out to your customer for that. Key point here is that not to make your eyes gloss over with all of this super busy framework here. It's not just very simple. There is a whole list of things here. You go down to the Scrum level, you can be Scrum Master certified. So basically you're the person kind of quarterbacking the whole operation for your team, keeping their iterations going, keeping backlogs of feature developments, minimized, making sure releases happen, things of that nature. At the end of the day, honestly, Scrum Master, this is basically just the person organizing your project, so your local project manager. But of course, we have to have a different name for that because it's Agile. Here's another view of this, which I think is kind of interesting. So here is a different kind of take on the Agile development framework. Should look familiar if you've been paying attention. We have the Envision phase. What's this? Oh, this is communication. Speculation. Story identification. What's a story? It's basically a high-level requirement. It's probably something more planning, system related. Even down to the UML level. Explore phase. Iterative delivery, project leadership. If you look at what is actually inside of this little bubble here, let's update our requirements. Let's do our development. Let's do our QA. Let's do our customer acceptance, or let's do user studies. So it's all here. Everything we've been talking about, it's just called different terms and it's being applied at different times. It's the same thing. But in these phases, we have more feedback loops, right? So we have more chances for people to have ownership of a project, more time for feedback, more time for refinement, right? It's not just one blob of requirements, go through the process, you're done. It's continuously refining things. Could be good, could be bad. You get a customer that doesn't know what they want, that becomes very bad because they want different features all the time. But if you're just simply going through refining and you have a good, say a Scrum Master or whoever's in charge of whatever level of this Agile process you're at, they can scope it, basically. But anyway, here, let's look at these two cycles here. So we have the Envision cycle and the Explore cycle. That's these guys up here. Figure out the product vision. So what's it going to do? Scope it out. What are the boundaries? What are the constraints? Come up with a release plan. So do your Gantt charts. Figure out what teams are working on which aspect of the project. And then we go through a loop. We keep refining things. So very similarly, we have an Explore cycle. We have our iteration plan. So what are we working on for this release? Let's do the work. Let's review our code. Let's review our tests, adapt what we need to, and keep going until we are happy. Key point, there's constant interactions here, right? So again, there's a lot of chance for people to have ownership and have time for feedback. So Scrum, Kanban, you may or may not have seen boards like this. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, welcome to Scrum. Here's your backlog of things that need to be done. Here are tasks that are currently in development. Uh-oh, nothing's ready to be tested, but here are things that are in test. We have production ready features. So these are all these cards. They have a format to them, and we'll get into that format later on. But these are your user stories. They have basically what the feature is that you're working on, written out in prose. Probably has somebody responsible, maybe a status written on there, have who's in charge of snacks for the day. So there's basically, it's just a different way of looking at software, but all the processes are still there. So here's a Scrum cycle. You have a backlog of tasks. You plan out what your sprint is, and if you've never heard of a sprint, you're probably going to hear it in your various classes because if I've noticed anything, professors like to have sprints for your term projects. Um, so what has to be done for the sprint? This is basically going to be your interim release. So what features have to be handled? Who's on your team? Do you have daily stand-up meetings to plan out the day's work? Review the release or the code, depending on where you're at, and then feedback until you get to project release. All right, so my sprint number one might be the midterm delivery for a demo or something of that nature. That'd be our increment. Point is, and the reason why I wanted to show you that in a little bit more detail than the others is more than likely you will encounter that when you go for an internship or a full-time job. It's probably going to be Agile-ish. Unless if you go to a company that's been doing it for a while, then it might be something older, but it's still good to have experience with these different processes. I absolutely love this figure because it kind of gives you an overview, and this is from the grad class textbook, so it's not anything that we have in here, but based on some constraints or some attributes of your project, this kind of gives you an idea of which process to select. So unclear user requirements. Waterfall, parallel, they're horrible at this, right? You need to know at the beginning of the project, otherwise waterfall will fail. You know, it's been shown time and time again. You can't go back easily. If you do, there's going to be delays, you go over budget, you know, there's all kinds of problems. Unfamiliar technology. So again, waterfall and parallel are poor. There's no time to learn unless you bring in new people. Whereas you go agile or prototyping, you have more flexibility. You can explore and learn new technologies, right? So let me pick on some of you doing your term project here. Some of you are doing it in Unity. Some people are doing it in RPG Maker. Some people are doing it in pure Java, right? You're probably going to have team members who have no idea what these technologies are. I can pretty much guarantee the RPG Maker team, there's probably one or two people who even know what that is, and the rest of the team like, okay, that sounds like fun. Let's learn something new. But there's that ramp up time where you have to become familiar with that tool. And same for Unity, Godot, even if just pure Java, if this is your second class ever at Grand Valley, right? And I'm not saying this is a bad thing. It's great to learn. That's why I'm doing the term project along with you all to learn something new for myself. But in these particular techniques, you don't have the time for that ramp up. Here you do. Kind of the interesting thing, which you also see here too, is that across the board, the agiles and your throwaway prototypings, these tend to be reasonable for most constraints, which is kind of why I said you'll probably see this later on. So this is not the end all be all of charts. Again, pick what works for your environment. I'm actually going to skip the slide-do slides in preference of showing you the GitHub stuff, but does anybody have any questions so far? Anything not make sense, or no, let's make this an evil robot. Give him a red eye, Terminator eye. Any questions at all so far? Break to hydrate. Multiple points of hydration. Okay, so who names a robot Pepper? This is actually the Pepper robot. Super creepy if you just kind of interact with it, but basically this is a robot that is intended to be a socially assistive robot. So people who need interaction. So these are often deployed at like elderly homes, or people have used these robots for studying autism. A robot for every condiment. Yes, this is the pepper robot. We also have the salt robot and then the butter robot, of course. But this is actually a pretty cool thing. It's interactive. Um, People who are not necessarily comfortable talking to other people actually don't mind talking to robots, which is kind of interesting. But I've seen some pretty cool work that some of my colleagues have done with this guy. It's actually pretty neat. We're going to skip this part. Basically, I'm just asking you what the different processes are. So waterfall is linear, spiral is evolutionary, agile is parallel. Was more of a fun little thing. What I wanted to get into though, again, so if you came in late, no class Friday, but do your group work. I will be online on Discord, but that'll be about it, I guess, and email. But I'm going to be basically in a live stream from 10 until, or I think 9 until the afternoon. But get the stuff done that I'm asking you to because it'll make your homework a lot easier. But what I kind of wanted to show you was a little demo of how I would use Git. I need to get some of those headphones with like the vents on them because I'm having a really hard time hearing how loud I am. So I created a term project repository for myself. So I forked it. Let me fork this to, I guess here, we'll fork it. So the one person on the team that has to fork, that's what you have to do. And I sent out the link as well and updated the homework because I apparently forgot it. But now I have my repo, and I'm going to go to my settings, and I would invite my teammates by clicking Manage Access, putting in my GitHub account, password, and then inviting people. So you just go by their username or their email. So whatever your teammates' usernames are for GitHub, this is how you invite them to be collaborators. Right, so that's step one. Get your term project repo set up. In there, you will have your artifacts, your meetings, proposal template stuff. So that's all in this repo. Started updating my README. So we're in Bearlib terminal and tracery with some links. I didn't put my favorite meme in there because I need to figure that out, obviously. There's so many. But let's say that I want to add some code in here, because that's kind of important to do, right? So I have an existing folder, and again, this is my Linux terminal. Feel free to use whatever your preference is. But I have this term project where I've got some Python scripts, I've got some fonts, some assets, basically stuff that I've been developing. I want to add it to my repo. First thing I have to do is, well, I need to rename this guy, obviously. Got a couple minutes here, let's do that. Frederick's CIS350 term project. I think that's similar to what you all had to do. So I renamed it. Let's go back. Too much stuff going on in my repo. Is this it? Ah. Let's go back. Are we renamed appropriately now? Rename. There we go. Sorry about that. I'm going to copy the URL. I'm going to now clone it. So git clone URL. Only have to do that once, right? I am now going to go into this project, CIS350 term project. List files. So here's everything from my GitHub repo. I'm going to do git pull every time, even though I don't have to, because this is a fresh repo. But in case one of my teammates who don't exist check something out, I have their changes. Now I need to add in all the files that I'm working on into this repo. And I have them in this other folder. So it is in two directories, or one directory above, and that's Frederick's SE, because I named it too similarly. So this is what I need to move in here. This is one way to do it. You can do this multiple ways. I'm just doing it on the terminal. Feel free to use Windows Explorer or Finder or whatever it is to just copy and paste things around. You can also add to a non-empty repo, but there's some extra headaches to go with that. So I'm just going to do the easy way. So copy cp-r, Frederick's SE term project, everything. And I'm going to copy it here. So if you're not a Linux person or know what these commands are, this is copy recursively whatever was in this folder, which is one level up. So like if you hit the up folder button, so go up a level, go into Frederick's SE term project, and then asterisk is everything. And then the period here means put it in my current directory. So I'm gonna go do that. And this takes a hot minute because it's got these fonts and some of the assets which are just PNGs. Gonna take a minute. So there we go. All right. So now when I ls, oops, uh-oh, I didn't want to put this in here. I wanted this in my source directory. So we can watch me screw up on stream. Move everything Python. Nope. Move everything Python into source. Move names into source. Move everything TTF into source. Move the assets file into source. And what do we have left? So move all the TTFs into source. All right, so that should be better. Git status. Have I screwed anything up? Nope, I've added everything there. Okie doke. So if I go into my source directory, I can just check to make sure everything's working, which means that I have all the files that I need. And yep, life is good. Got my little NPCs roaming around. Got some text being generated. I've got my enemies, which are currently not doing anything. Got some water. So it works. I need to check this into GitHub. So it's git add everything. All right. Git commit -m initial source code check-in. So I'm staged. I'm ready to go. Now I've made my commit, but again, this is local because Git is a distributed repo. Git push. E Fredericks. Password. Hunter2 if anybody's as old as I am. It's not Hunter2. All right, so pushed up. I refresh my repo on GitHub. And hey, I see my commit message right here. Pop into source. I need to clean up this PyCache because that doesn't belong in there. This is compiled Python. But hey, here's all the stuff that I need for my project. All checked in. Again, this can be a very easy process if you don't, start worrying about multiple branches and things of that nature. But just kind of wanted to show you my process, I suppose. Anybody have any questions at all? Comments or concerns? All right, what do we want here? Need some hot outro music. This is not my actual YouTube list of stuff. This is just my upload videos and don't bother using stuff. Anyway, you all have a wonderful, I suppose, weekend. Again, I will be online in some way, but we won't have a stream on Friday. Anyway, enjoy everybody. Hope you all have a good time. And I will see you all, I suppose, Monday. Bye-bye.